You are listening to the free version of last month's Patreon Party People podcast. If you want to listen to the newest podcasts as soon as they go live, simply visit patreon.com/blazehedgehog and pledge $1 or more. Patreon donors also get custom RSS feeds to download the podcast straight into their favorite listening device. And Patreon isn't just for podcasts. Donating is the best way to show your support for everything I do, whether it's making videos, creating games, producing music, or whatever else strikes your fancy. Just go to patreon.com/blazehedgehog to learn more about the many different ways you can show your support and all of the bonus content you can get. Hello and welcome to the Patreon Party People podcast for Sunday, February 17th, 2019. I'm, of course, as always, your host, Ryan Bloom. I apologize for this podcast being late a lot, and usually it's because it's out of my control. Well, this time it wasn't necessarily out of my control. I've just been, in kind of a funky mood lately. And I just, I haven't really felt like doing much productive stuff, let's say. And, that's totally on me. I don't know if it's like homesickness or what, but haven't had the energy to really do the things that I've said that I should do. We'll, get into this more later in the podcast. But like part of that is, you might not think it because it's just a podcast and everyone talks about how easy podcasts are. I put actually like a surprisingly large amount of work into this podcast when I probably shouldn't have to. If you don't know like my production process for this podcast, usually what happens is I write out notes. I mean, I think that's like a given, everyone writes out notes for a podcast. So they know the topics they're going to discuss. The problem with me is that when I write notes, I write like hyper detailed notes. I think this podcast probably averages around 6 to 10 pages of notes for, we'll say, an hour-long podcast. Maybe more than that, maybe less. I don't know. I think, I could just go in and check right now. But I think last month's podcast, that big, super long 3-hour podcast, I think I was pushing 15, 16, maybe 17 pages of notes. Essentially how I write those notes is I go through the podcast step by step in my head, sort of like I'm recording it live, and I write down this stream of consciousness of things that I think would be important to say, like I'm going to read off those notes while I do the podcast. And that'll take me, 4, 5, 6 hours to the point where last month, it took me 3 days to write the podcast notes because, I'd write a little bit on it all day long. And then, I'd get to, let's say, a break point because I'll write, break music here in the podcast notes. And I'd say, okay, that's enough for today. And I'd close it and I'd shut down and go to bed. I probably don't need to put that much effort into writing podcast notes. And because, that's one of the things that's kind of been scaring me away from the podcast lately is the idea that I have to sit down for, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 hours to write podcast notes. So that I know what to say or whatever. When, lately, I haven't really been reading from those notes super well. I'll get the general gist of the things that I want to say, but I won't read the notes out exactly as I wrote them down, which means that I've been doing all this extra work kind of for nothing. So this month, to help alleviate that stress, we're going a little bit off topic. Well, not tons, I still wrote out, we'll say, I think it came out to about 3 pages of notes this time, but I did try and be a lot more sparse and a lot more general, knowing that, I would go off script, so-called, and just, trying to freestyle a little bit more like a podcast is supposed to do, instead of basically just writing down a script to read from, more or less, and then not reading from that script at all. That's just kind of like how I roll, I guess. I don't know. If you've read the things I've written in the past, you'll know I tend to be fairly long-winded. And part of me wonders if that's like the entire reason my podcasts feel so weird to me. Like, I'll get done recording a podcast and it will feel like I have no idea what I was talking about. And by that, I mean, it feels like I jump around from topic to topic so almost like randomly and confusingly that it doesn't make sense in my head after I've said it, if that kind of makes sense. And I think that's because I sort of, wave in and out of these hyper complicated podcast notes that I write, so that it just ends up being like, here's something I said that is exactly how I wrote it, and here's something that is nothing like how I wrote it. And then, in the middle of the podcast, in the middle of reading my notes, I have to go back and read and figure out, okay, how does A connect to B, connect to D, so that I can get back to C, if that makes any sense at all. So I think from here on out, I'm going to try and record this more like a real podcast, where it's more just me thinking of things to say as I think of them, instead of, reading from these notes like I said, like it's a script, and it's not supposed to be a script. I don't know, it's weird. This podcast might have a different vibe than the other podcasts, let's say. But yeah, it's just been a weird month for me, folks. It's been a weird month. Like, I got sick, and like part of that's what threw me off to begin with. Because I was in the middle of like writing an article and putting together a video, and then, I got this late winter cold that's been going around my family lately. And, technically I got off pretty easily compared to everyone else in my family. My sister-in-law was sick for like 2.5 weeks. It hit my mom really hard. She almost went to the hospital. It hit her so hard. And for me, I got kind of like a sore throat. I had a fever for a couple days. Maybe a little bit of a stuffy nose. It came and went like fairly uneventfully, relatively speaking to everyone else that I know. So, I kind of got off easy there, but at the same time, I got just sick enough to where everything that I was in the middle of working on, I kind of didn't want to touch it anymore. And since then, since I got sick, that was 2-3 weeks ago at this point. I was going to say 2 or 3 weeks ago would have been like right after the podcast. It feels like it was more recent than that, but I don't know. It was a time ago, to the point where I'm sitting here thinking, I should get back to work on things like that. And, like I said, just haven't really had it in me. I don't know, like maybe the cold is still sticking around and it's like giving me like this lethargy or whatever you want to call it. I don't know. I don't feel that sick. Like every now and then I'll get a stuffy nose or like a tickle in the back of my throat, and, I cough really hard every now and then, but I don't feel sick. I don't know. But yeah, just, bear with me, folks. I'm trying to get back on track as hard as I can, let's say. I don't like being bummed out like this, and especially bummed out when I don't really know what necessarily is causing it. If it is homesickness, I was thinking about this last night, if it is like a form of homesickness for Colorado, maybe like it's been snowing a lot here lately, like a lot. Most of it's melted. It's snowing again today. But a lot of it melted, and now it's snowing again. When it was at its highest, it was probably up to around my knee, which is, well, gosh, I'm like 5'10", 5'11", maybe 5'9", so, up to my knee is probably like 1.5 feet, 2 feet, maybe? I don't know. But, it's been a lot of snow, and snow makes me think of Colorado. That's one of those things, I think I said this on a podcast a month or 2 or even 3 ago. that one of my fears coming out here to Nevada was that, we wouldn't really have very strong winters. I do technically live in the desert, even though, elevation wise, we're not too far off from where we lived in Colorado. We're right on the border of Lake Tahoe, which gets tons of snow. You want to talk about snow totals. Before our first big snowstorm rolled in a week and a half ago, we got like a winter weather warning for Lake Tahoe that said they were due for 10 to 12 feet of snow. Not inches, feet. That is like more than twice my height in snow. And I can't even imagine what it would look like in a place where they got 12 feet of snow and having to dig out of that. You'd be digging like a literal tunnel at that point, you'd think. But I wouldn't really know what 12 feet of snow even looks like, But I was worried we weren't going to get snow. And last year, 2018, early 2018, late 2017, we didn't get much snow. We didn't have a white Christmas. We didn't have snow around Halloween, which is something we would have sometimes in Colorado. It would get pretty cold on like October 31st, and we'd had snowstorms on Halloween. It was a very warm winter, early 2018, late 2017. I think we ended up finally getting like a little bit of snow somewhere in the middle of January, somewhere like around the end of March into May, maybe even by April we had a little bit of snow. And it was just, I figured, okay, being in Nevada means we'll get a tiny little bit of snow on the edge of winter coming into spring, and that will be our lot. And like that was reinforced by my brother. He would say, oh, we don't get very big snowstorms around here in Nevada. And the funny thing is, ever since we've come to Nevada, I feel like every single thing he's told us that's been like that, where he said, that never happens out here. Since we've come to Nevada, every single one of those things has been wrong. Well, or close to every single one of those things has been wrong. Case in point, this year, we got feet and feet and feet of snow, and maybe it's kind of just reminding me of Colorado. But something that I'm glad that I don't have to do anymore, which I had to do all the time in Colorado, is dig out of these snowstorms. As much as I love snow, I don't like having to shovel snow. And the last 2 or 3 snowstorms we had in Colorado, over the last 2 or 3 years, I meant to say, they were big, deep storms. You talk about snow up to my knees, try snow up to your chest. That's how big the drifts were getting there in Colorado. And, there were a few storms there where I'd have to run out there, shovel all of our sidewalks, dig the car out of this big snowdrift, because if I didn't, then there was going to be twice as much snow to cover all that up. So, it was this case where I was having to shovel all of our sidewalks and dig out the car basically every 3 days for about 2 weeks straight. And, that's great exercise. You get real big, strong arm muscles from that, and, you really work your core and all that stuff, but it wasn't fun. It's one of those things where you go out there all bundled up because it's like, 15 degrees outside, and you come in a puddle of your own sweat because you are so covered in like heavy clothing, and it just traps the heat inside, and you're just a disaster. And I don't miss having to shovel snow. Thankfully, we have, there's like an army of groundskeepers in this apartment complex, and they're sort of okay at keeping on top of the snow. They're not great, but I'd say that our little corner here has it better than some. If you don't know, when I have to go like check the mail or whatever, we live not on like the furthest edge of the apartment complex. We live somewhere around, in the middle somewhere, but it is still, walking to get the mail from where we live is a good 10-minute walk. I have to pass a lot of apartment complexes, And I would say that our little corner where we live is probably the most well shoveled of the entire apartment complex. There are places that don't get shoveled at all, where, it is just like pure ice under your feet, basically. And that's not very fun. I don't know, like, if we're expected to shovel our own sidewalks and we just have someone that lives around here that does it for us. I mean, that might be the case. There was something when we moved in where she said, I hope you have your own snow shovel or something like that. Like they were warning us that we'd have to shovel our own sidewalks. But so far, that hasn't been a problem. That hasn't been my responsibility. And that is something I'm very thankful for. I haven't really thought about writing on the Sonic Forces video since the last podcast. Again, part of that is the funk I'm in right now, but also I've been thinking over that video and I'm not entirely sure that the path I was going down is a very good idea. So I guess, like, I was kind of trying to keep it under wraps because I didn't want to spoil it very much. But the idea I was, thinking about going for was sort of like deconstructing the game and trying to figure out, like, the paths that led us to Sonic Forces. And by doing that, I mean I was going to, like, analyze the structure at Sonic Team and, related game mechanics and things like that, and try and, like, figure out what led us, well, again, like I said, what led us to Sonic Forces. And it's one of those things where the more I think about, like, the notes I've written down and the things I wanted to write about, the more it starts to feel kind of like backseat game design in a way, and not even because, I did that Sonic, How Do We Fix Sonic video, which was like the ultimate in backseat game design. That was basically me saying that, if I made a Sonic game myself, here's what it would play like. And here's why I would want it to play like that. Here's everything that 3D Sonic games do wrong, and here's how I would do them right. That was that video. And on the flip side, for this Sonic Forces video, it was just starting to feel too much like I was making, like, leaps in logic, jumping to conclusions that maybe necessarily weren't warranted. And it started to make me feel really uncomfortable about going in that direction. Because kind of like the last thing that I want to do is be one of those YouTube channels that kind of, like, is trying to be too smart for their own good, I guess, and then being, like, super wrong about all the assumptions they're making. Because, there's a lot of, like, channels out there that talk about, like, gaming news and all this other stuff that kind of, like, sensationalizes things, right? They don't know what they're talking about, but they're sort of making, like, these super incorrect stabs in the dark that, paint game developers as, like, demons, basically, where they're like, oh, they're all out to get us, and we're innocent little guys, and oh, woe is me, and, well, not even like that, that would be fine, that's kind of the stuff that Jim Sterling does, and he's okay, he's not the best, but, he talks about a lot of very important issues, he does a lot of very important research, but, I mean, like, the channels out there that they only exist to, like, stir the pot and get people enraged about things that they don't really understand. And that's kind of what, like, I was starting to feel like with this Sonic Forces video, and I don't think it was working out. So, like, I don't know what to do for that video. It might be just more of a plain Jane video review. I don't know. It's just a really weird thing to think about right now, because it has been so long since Sonic Forces came out. And obviously, I'm running a channel, not a channel, but a series called Better Late Than Never Video Games, right? Which is, true to its name, talks about video games, better late than never. So, it does make sense that I could just talk about Sonic Forces whenever I want it, right? It doesn't matter that it's been, like, a year and 4 months since that game came out. But at the same time, I feel like I should say something a little more intelligent than Sonic Forces is a mediocre to bad game, right? So now I don't know what to do. I've had like thoughts before about other kinds of videos I could do. Once upon a time, I was going to submit an article called Sonic the Hedgehog and the Fear of Speed, which was about, kind of how Sonic Team has been sort of afraid of letting Sonic go fast. They're constantly trying to find ways to slow Sonic down and, turn him back into more of a platformer like he was in the Sega Genesis games, when I think, like, their gameplay systems that they've come up with, stuff like Sonic Unleashed, Sonic Generations, etc., don't really, like, lend themselves super well to that kind of platforming gameplay. So, I was getting a whole outline written for that to submit a pitch, see if anyone would pick that up. And, I never finished that pitch. So, I've been trying, like, thinking, I could reuse that for a video or whatever. And I could maybe reuse that for the Sonic Forces video, but I'd have to figure out, like, a better angle than just this generic, oh, we don't want Sonic to go fast article or whatever. So I don't know. The Sonic Forces video is still on my mind, even if I'm not, like, actively writing on it right now. And what I should do to, like, maybe, like, restoke the fires of creativity is, like, go back and finally finish that PS4 version of Sonic Forces. I think I got all the way up to most of the way through the game. I think there was only, like, 3 or 4 levels left, and I never really finished it because, I did that stream on the PC, and I just, didn't really feel like replaying Sonic Forces again. But, maybe finishing the game would finally shake something loose in my brain, to where I could, like, actually write an article or something. I don't know. Again, kind of a weird mood this month. Earlier, I mentioned that I was, like, in the middle of writing and producing some stuff before I got sick. That was, for one, a Sonic R video. Maybe you saw the tweet about this. I don't know. Recently, there's been a Sonic R mod that restores the original, like, Saturn colors. If you didn't know about this, basically, the original Sega Saturn version of Sonic R had colored lighting in its maps. And the very first original PC version of Sonic R also carried over this colored lighting. And then, over the years, as, like, 3D acceleration came into mainstream usage, and the PC version of Sonic R, got a few updates to, support more modern graphics, rendering, architecture, or whatever, that colored lighting function slowly got, like, depreciated and eventually turned off. And very recently, there's been, like, a movement to figure out a way to get that colored lighting back into, like, a form that can be displayed on the version of, like, the modded version of Sonic R that is available to play on, like, Windows 10. And I posted a video up on Twitter of the modded version running with the new/old colored lighting, and I ran a poll, and I said, should I do a video about this like I did with the lighting restoration mod for Sonic Adventure? And the the response was an overwhelming yes. So I was in the middle of writing out kind of a short script, because it doesn't really need to be quite as long as that Sonic Adventure video did, but I was in the process of writing out a script. Same kind of format, just a little bit of history about the game and the technology, why the technology went away, basically everything I just told you, and then an installation tutorial and footage of the game running with the new colored lighting. And I got about 90% of the way through that script before I got sick. And it's kind of basically sitting there in a mostly finished state, sort of just waiting for me to... I think all that's really left is writing out all the Patreon names, the Patreon donors at the end, and then I can record my dialogue. Oh, excuse me. I can record my dialogue, record my footage, and then edit together the video. And, that was 2 weeks ago. So that's coming soon if I can ever, get the gears turning again. Second thing was, again, maybe you saw these tweets, but GameStop was having a flash sale, or not even like a flash sale, it was like a clearance sale on refurbished Xbox 360s. And my current Xbox 360 was from... Originally, I got my Xbox 360 in 2006. It red ringed sometime in December of 2006. I sent it into the repair center. They sent me a new one in February of 2007, like almost 3 months later. Then that one, when I got it, was already kind of broken. Like it didn't really work right from the start. And I remember telling like tech support, hey, there's something wrong with this Xbox 360. Videos are stuttering. It can be kind of weird sometimes. And they sort of brushed me off. They said, it's fine, don't worry about it. And then, like, I don't know, a year and a half later, we'll say 2008, 2009, it red ringed again. And I had to get another new one. And this was, I think, literally a month before they announced the new Xbox One or Xbox S or whatever, the smaller form factor Xbox with HDMI out. And this was like a month before that. So I got like one of the last component cable enabled Xbox 360s. So one of those Xbox 360s, the first models, it sounds like a jet engine when you turn it on. The disk drive was starting to fail. My controller was getting like the analog stick was getting super loose. So for a while now, I've thought, I need a new Xbox 360. And I figured prices would come down once the Xbox One was out. And they didn't. Up until a couple years ago, maybe even like a year ago, a brand new unopened Xbox 360 was still over $200. So when GameStop started clearancing out their refurbished, previously owned Xbox 360s, it kind of became like this thought in my head, like, it's now or never. If I don't get even a refurbished Xbox 360 right now, I probably never will. So I spent, I think it was $80 on an Xbox Elite? I don't even remember, like, there's like 3 or 4 models of Xbox 360 now. It is the last model of Xbox 360. The one that they came out with, I think when they announced the Xbox One, they announced one final model of Xbox 360 console, and that's the one I got. So I spent quite a while setting this new 360 back up, getting all my games downloaded, getting my accounts set up, things like that. And it turned into sort of like a massive nightmare. Obviously, you're not supposed to set an Xbox 360 up in 2019. There's a whole huge big Twitter thread about this that I wrote. If you go to my Twitter profile, I've actually set up like all the tweets into a moment. I don't know if you can view those on mobile or not, but if you go to like the Twitter website to my profile, you'll be able to find the moment I set up. That is all the like 30 or 40 tweets I made, probably more than that, honestly, about what it was like to set up this Xbox 360. And towards the end of writing that big tweet thread about all the problems I encountered, the weird ephemera that is in that console still, all the bugs and glitches and weird stuff that I was going through, having to set that thing back up again, I realized that would be a pretty good article for BLTN.net, Better Late Than Never Video Games. Again, it's right up the alley, better late than never, what it's like to set up an Xbox 360 in 2019. So I was in the process of writing that before I got sick. Maybe it was a little bit after I got sick. I don't remember at this point. Anyway, I got probably about 70 or 80% of the way through that article, basically just transcribing my tweets, making it read really nice, things like that. And then I got sick. I got out of the mood to work on things like that. And here we are. So again, that's coming soon. Again, I could probably finish writing that in a day or two if I just, get going on it again. It should prove to be a fun read. Be a companion piece to the very short video I posted on my YouTube channel of some of the problems that took place while I was trying to set this Xbox 360 back up. But the good news is that, I'm through the other side now. Like, everything works. Even the games that I thought wouldn't work now work because I figured it out. But, that's something that I did this month. That's something that I've yet to do. So, again, like I said earlier, keep an eye out for that. I guess that's it for now, actually. I'd written here some other stuff, as usual. Like as far as working on videos go, as far as scripts and articles and things like that go. Another part of the reason that I'm starting to, it's so hard to get back into the gear of things is I'm starting to get that game development itch. I'm really starting to think about Overbite again. Quite a bit, in fact. And especially because the news just came out quite recently, like within the last week. The Sonic Mania development team established their own studio called Evening Star. And for those of you out there who don't know or just aren't like a weird, stupid, huge Sonic trivia nerd buff or whatever. Trivia nerd buff? Is that? I don't know. Anyway, for those of you who don't know, Evening Star is the name of a song in Knuckles Chaotix, which seems to be something that team likes to reference. Anyway, they're also, part of establishing a studio is that they're also hiring now. They're hiring for a level designer and an artist. And I've had quite a few friends encourage me to apply. And I have had the worst case of cold feet imaginable when it comes to that. Because, there's a lot standing in the way of me applying to work at the Sonic Mania development team studio. First and foremost is that their requirements say they need someone local to Los Angeles. And I know I just said earlier that I kind of live on the border of California. Lake Tahoe is a 15-minute drive from here. But Los Angeles is a 7 or 8 hour drive from here. So it's not like I could really commute. I'd have to fully relocate to Los Angeles. And I don't know if I feel comfortable doing that. Even if it was for a dream job, let's say. I mean, I don't know. That's one of those things where you can't really answer if it was a dream job. And I don't know if it would be because, again, partially another problem is I don't know if I get along too well with the development team or some of the development team down there. We've had our differences in the past. I know people on that development team from way back in the Sonic Fan Games HQ days. They were people that posted there. They were celebrities. I was kind of a celebrity. But it's a really weird, awkward situation. And it's one that I don't know if I necessarily want to confront. And that's also because, people say, oh, you're a shoo-in. You know so much about Sonic the Hedgehog. You're such a good whatever. And I'm like, there's no guarantee that these guys are ever going to work on a Sonic the Hedgehog game again. Or there's no guarantee that their next game will be a Sonic the Hedgehog game or will even be related to a Sonic the Hedgehog game. What are their requirements or their bonuses for putting on your resume is having 3D design experience, 3D levels, 3D modeling, things like that. So, that's not something I can do. I've tried, and, I've been meaning to try again sometime recently because I know that there's things like, Mudbox out there and whatever else that makes, 3D design a lot easier. I can do Mudbox. I know that. I've used software like that before. It's very fun to mess around in. But just 3D is still kind of out of my wheelhouse. And they're obviously sort of looking in that direction. They do mention that they are looking for someone who can do 2D stuff also, 2D level design, 2D artwork, things like that. So obviously, they are still looking in that direction, but you just never know. It's one of those things where it's just there are so many doubts in my head that I don't think I could apply I'd say even if I wanted to, and I do kind of want to, but it is such a complicated mess in my brain. And then the one defining thing of it all is that I made a promise about Overbite. I got, $117 on itch.io to put Overbite on Steam, to take that Game Jam version and make a full game out of it. And I haven't done that yet. It has been 2 years, going on 3 years, and I have not really actually started the new version of Overbite yet. I have a very detailed design document now that is constantly growing basically every week. I still write on that thing constantly. Not necessarily about new levels or new enemies or new mechanics or things like that, but there are things that I'm putting into that design document week after week after week, and it's been that way ever since the Game Jam version of Overbite came out. I've been, adding bits and pieces here and there. It's probably getting, frankly, a little bloated. But I made a promise that I would finish that. And if I went chasing my dreams to the Evening Star studio without finishing Overbite first, I would feel like scum. Because I made a promise. I took money from people. That is a responsibility that I am beholden to. And I cannot, in good conscience, apply for a job there and have an opportunity to where maybe I would actually get that job unless I finish Overbite first. And the place I am in my life is one as such that I don't know when I'm going to finish Overbite. So it is what it is, I guess, That's just how it's gonna be. It sucks, but there's not really much I can do about it. I'm kind of trapped in a rock and a hard place here, folks. And again, maybe this is one of those things that's contributing to my mood, is thinking about this conflict, about thinking maybe I could apply, maybe that could go somewhere, and thinking about all the worries associated with that, and all of the things I haven't done. So I don't know. That is what it is. As I said earlier, that's where that is. And on that note, it is time for a break. I will see you guys after the music to talk about the usual media consumption nonsense. Bye. The following segment contains spoilers for Dragon Ball, Dragon Ball Z, Dragon Ball Super, and the recently released Dragon Ball Super Broly the movie. I just figured I'd give you guys a heads up before you get too deep into the next segment. And we're back. Now is the time of the podcast where I talk about general media I've been consuming this month, and top of that list is probably Dragon Ball Super Broly the movie. That is the latest Dragon Ball, I was going to say Dragon Ball Z movie, but I guess technically speaking, it is Dragon Ball Super. Especially given that it takes place after the events of the recent Dragon Ball Super TV series, anime, or whatever. So, maybe there will be spoilers in this discussion for the end of that show. I'm not entirely sure. I never actually watched Dragon Ball Super because early seasons of that show were just retelling of Dragon Ball Z movies, that had come out a couple years beforehand, and generally speaking, it sounded like the Dragon Ball Super adaptations of those movies weren't considered very good. The animation quality wasn't there. They were just more tedious versions of things that were 90-minute movies or whatever. So the first two sagas of Dragon Ball Super, the Battle of Gods and Resurrection Frieza stuff, never sounded especially good, which kind of soured my impressions of the rest of the anime. I guess it did eventually find its footing, and it found its animation budget, especially given that, I've seen stuff towards the ends of Dragon Ball Super, the Tournament of Power or whatever, the Universe Survival Tournament or whatever it's called. The animation quality definitely gets really good towards the end of that series. But boy, it does not start that way. It looks extremely cheap. So, never watched Dragon Ball Super, never really felt the impetus. Though, that's every now and then I've kind of thought, maybe I should watch Dragon Ball Super. But anyway, Dragon Ball Super Broly is a surprisingly good movie. I don't want to say that it's like the best of the new movies they've been making. I think Battle of Gods still stands out as probably the best Dragon Ball Z movie ever made. Just for the fact that, I don't know, it feels nice to get back to those characters again. It feels, like a step above in terms of writing quality of basically everything else in Dragon Ball Z. Super Broly is probably better than Resurrection of Frieza, Resurrection F. I mean, I guess, like, Resurrection of F had some good moments in it, especially the ending where, spoilers for Resurrection of F, if you haven't seen that, and you're interested in watching that, skip ahead maybe a minute or two. The ending to that is basically that, like, Goku screws up and condemns the whole planet to destruction until they have like this convenient time travel moment where they say, hey, wait a minute, we can just like rewind 10 minutes and stop Goku from making like the ultimate mistake. And it's this whole moment where like Vegeta is supposed to get all the glory and Goku ends up stealing his thunder anyway. It's a pretty good thing, and you get to see like Frieza trapped in hell, and he's like, I hate hell, because I guess hell is supposed to be like, it's a very personal sort of thing, so, Frieza is like Space Hitler, as some people would call him, and his version of hell is like all these, really happy, like angels and things like that, singing like happy songs around him, and it drives him insane, and that's pretty good. But Super Broly, so if you don't know, Broly is a character from an earlier Dragon Ball Z movie. It's like the 6th or 7th Dragon Ball Z movie. Back, gosh, I think it might have even been before Frieza was introduced. Back when, they were well, no, it would have to be after Frieza was introduced, because the whole thing about Broly is all the original Dragon Ball Z movies were not canon. They were not part of the Dragon Ball Z mythology, let's say. Usually, they would take concepts from that season and run with them in their own direction. So, early on in Dragon Ball Z, we got to meet Goku's brother Raditz. And the movie that came from that was a movie called The Tree of Might, where we meet a character that looks like he could be Goku's brother, who comes down and he builds this big alien tree with this, fruit that gives you fighting energy or whatever. It's really weird. We had Majin Buu at the end of Dragon Ball Z, and he's sort of like this magical being, sort of almost like a demon, but not really. He's just like this magical creation. So for a Dragon Ball Z movie, we got Fusion Reborn, because, fighting Majin Buu was all about like fusing together two personalities. Like, Goku and Vegeta would fuse together to form Vegito, Trunks and Goten would fuse together to form Gotenks, things like that. In order to fight Majin Buu, you'd get two powerful fighters would fuse together into one super powerful fighter. So you had Fusion Reborn, this Dragon Ball Z movie, about Goku and Vegeta fusing to form Gogeta to fight this sort of magical demonic enemy called Janemba. Or Janemba, I don't know. It's a Japanese name. I'm butchering the pronunciation. Anyway, so, you have all these Dragon Ball Z movies that are taking concepts from the season that was running at the time and doing putting their own spin on things. So, during the Frieza saga, obviously a big plot point is the legend of the Super Saiyan, the legendary Super Saiyan. So they introduce this movie as this character introduced called Broly. And Broly is the legendary Super Saiyan as far as this movie is concerned. The original Dragon Ball Z movie from like 1993 or whatever. Probably even earlier than that. Probably like 92. I don't know. Dragon Ball Z was a long time ago. Anyway, the whole thing about Broly is that he was the strongest fighter in the universe. He was stronger than Goku. He was stronger than them all. And nobody could beat him. And the whole movie is just Goku essentially punching a brick wall. Broly shrugs off everything. Everything. Every attack he's got, every team up they do, Broly just never has a scratch on him. And then 5 minutes before the movie ends, again, spoilers for another Dragon Ball Z movie here about this Broly movie. Spoilers, literally 5 minutes before the credits roll, Goku punches him so hard that Broly explodes. And it's not really, very well explained where Goku got the strength to do that from. I mean, I guess there's this whole plot point about, everyone lending Goku their fighting energy or whatever so that, he has the power to do this super punch. But, you show this whole movie where Broly is just shrugging off everything. Even super powerful Kamehamehas and whatever else, Dragon Ball Z stuff. And then it just feels a little bit cheap that 5 minutes before the credits roll, Goku magically punches him one more time, and it's the one punch that counts, and Broly explodes. And then, literally, Broly explodes, Goku collapses from exhaustion, and the credits roll. There's no, epilogue or anything like that. It is literally just punch, oh, he's dead, credits roll. That's it. So, somehow, this Broly movie became the favorite of a lot of fans. I was going to say everyone's favorite. That is definitely not true. There is a growing contingent of fans that really hates this Broly movie, largely because it is this sort of thing where they portray Broly as this invincible god, basically, and Goku can't touch him. And then all of a sudden, Broly just falls over dead. Just completely at random. And that's, that's stupid, obviously. Even by Dragon Ball Z standards, that's pretty stupid. So, Broly is this popular character. The director of this Broly movie loves him. If you've ever, read interviews, he will cheerlead for this Broly guy until the cows come home. I remember, not best friends, but, their new podcast, Castle's Super Beast. They were talking, Pat brought up an interview or something, where they asked the creator of Broly, okay, actually, I need to establish context for this first. So, Dragon Ball Super, Battle of Gods, that whole thing. The whole thing with that is that Goku meets another god. He meets the god of destruction, Beerus. He's this purple cat guy. He is stronger than Goku by orders of magnitude. He's beyond everyone's level so far that Goku can't touch him, nobody can touch him, etc. Okay, so this cat god guy, Beerus, they ask the creator of Broly, how, would Broly be able to hold his own against Beerus? And, the creator of Broly says, oh yeah, Broly would kill him without breaking a sweat. That's the kind of person that made Broly. That's Broly's character. Okay, so now they have this new Dragon Ball Super Broly movie after all this setup. And that's because, I guess from what I've heard, Akira Toriyama finally, acknowledged that Broly is this super popular character. And even Toriyama did not like that Broly movie. The original 1994 or 1995 or 1992 or whatever Broly movie. He liked the character, he liked how popular Broly had become, so he decided he would make his own version of Broly, and that's this movie. And the big thing about the old Broly and the new Broly is that the new Broly actually has, characterization and a personality. If you've never seen that original Broly movie, I think the character's whole impetus is that he grew up together with Goku when they were babies in this pod or something. It's Saiyan culture. Don't worry about it. But the thing is, I guess when Goku was a baby before he got shipped off to Earth, he used to cry a lot. And that made Broly, as a baby, so mad that I think he cracked the ceiling or something of his crib, and a piece of ceiling fell on him, a piece of rock. And from that day forth, Broly hates Goku. it becomes Broly's mission in life to kill Goku. That is his entire characterization. He hates Goku because they were babies together. That's it. This new Broly, like, it continues the theme of the Dragon Ball series of, I guess, like, bad dads. Like, if you really think about it, Goku's a bad dad, Vegeta's a bad dad, Piccolo is probably the best dad of them all, but also he's like a space alien demon man, so, that's a whole thing into itself. And then this Dragon Ball Super Broly movie. Broly's father is a man named Paragus, who is one of the last surviving Saiyans, along with Broly. And the whole thing with Broly in this movie is that I guess they try and explain that he has this kind of, like, aberration, I guess, like a one-time mutation. So you know how, like, sometimes there will be a person who is born with a third nipple, right? Or, I don't know, like, they're something, they're born different than everyone else. Broly is born different than all the other Saiyans. So, in Dragon Ball Z lore, the Saiyans, when they look up at a full moon, they turn into something called a great ape, which is like a 100-foot tall King Kong monster that is like super duper powerful, but is also kind of like a wild animal. And this comes up multiple times over the Dragon Ball series, where Goku turns into a great ape, Gohan turns into a great ape, Vegeta turns into a great ape. And when they do, they get like this massive power boost, but they kind of go insane for a little while, right? Broly's whole thing is that he has, like, I guess, the great ape's power, even though he doesn't transform into a great ape. But when he does, when he, taps into this great ape power, he gets like this green energy around him, and he goes crazy, He gets like super muscly and big and huge, and he just turns into like this rage monster. Which is, kind of like what the old Broly was, but now he has more of a reason for that, right? Now he actually has, it's not just, oh, I'm so angry, I'm a big, powerful, strong man. Now it's like, there is something physically wrong with me. I have a one-time mutation that turns me into this monster. And Paragus, his father, is, there's like this whole plot line. This like movie like dives real deep into like the Frieza military and their involvement in the Saiyan race, and the destruction of planet Vegeta, all this like really important lore stuff to like why Goku ended up on Earth. Goku's parents, we see a lot of Goku's parents at first. You see Nappa back when he was way younger, and he actually has hair in this movie. It's insane. It's all this like Saiyan lore stuff. Paragus is, I don't know. Yeah, there's a whole thing with like King Vegeta, Vegeta's father. Yes, it's Planet Vegeta, King Vegeta, Prince Vegeta. That's the Saiyans for you. But there's this whole thing where Paragus knows that his infant son Broly is way more powerful than the king's son Prince Vegeta. And Paragus gets like banished from the Saiyan planet with Broly, and there's this whole thing where Paragus is now like super against the Saiyans. He hates Vegeta, King Vegeta, he hates Prince Vegeta, he wants his revenge, and he kind of channels that through Broly. So Broly has this like rage mutation, and Paragus kind of just makes it worse. And the whole like crux of the story is Paragus was a bad dad to Broly, and now Broly is like seriously messed up. Like, he had this rage thing that like multiplied his power beyond measure, beyond any other Saiyan in the universe, beyond even Goku. And all Paragus did was sort of make Broly into a monster. And like, that's the whole plot line, basically, is that Paragus is a bad dad, and he made Broly into a bad person when he did not necessarily have to be a bad person. And it's something to grab onto. It's not like the deepest plot in the world. It's, again, typical Dragon Ball Z movie stuff. It's just kind of an excuse for everyone to fight a lot. And there's a lot of fighting in this movie. Like, it's kind of weird. Like, the first half of the movie is this, like, really slow burn. Like I said, it's all about the Frieza military and their involvement in Planet Vegeta and the destruction of Planet Vegeta, and what a huge, like, just endless jerk Frieza is. And then the second half of the movie is just one big long fight scene between Goku and Broly, and sometimes Vegeta, and sometimes Frieza. It's good. It's probably a solid number 2. Like, if Battle of Gods is the best Dragon Ball Z movie, then Dragon Ball Super Broly is a solid number 2, let's say. There's lots of great comedy in there. Frieza is absolutely hilarious. They really lay it on thick. Like, the whole thing with Frieza is that he's supposed to be, like, this ultimate villain, right? They keep bringing him back. Goku killed Frieza way back in the original Dragon Ball Z series. He's been revived more than once, at least in the movies. Again, the movies aren't canon, the original movies at the very least. They aren't canon, but Frieza comes back multiple times in those movies. Obviously, he came back in the Dragon Ball Super anime. Towards the end, they revived him for the Tournament of Power or whatever. But he keeps coming back. He came back in that Resurrection of Frieza movie. And so he's supposed to be like the ultimate villain. He's like, the whole theme of Dragon Ball, in a nutshell, is that Goku makes friends with everybody, right? Piccolo was evil, he made friends with Piccolo. Vegeta was evil, he made friends with Vegeta. He made friends with Yajirobe. Yajirobe was kind of like a jerk. Krillin was kind of a jerk. Tien tried to kill Goku. Goku made friends with him. Yamcha tried to kill Goku. Goku made friends with him. So, it's this whole cycle of, here's a villain, Goku fights the villain, Goku eventually convinces the villain to be a good guy. That's the whole arc of Dragon Ball. And for a while, I guess at the end of Dragon Ball Super or whatever, it seems like he's doing that with Frieza. Frieza, apparently at the end of Dragon Ball Super, helps Goku beat another big bad. And you think, okay, now Frieza's one of the good guys, because that's the cycle of Dragon Ball. And Dragon Ball Super Broly says, nope, Frieza's still a villain. He's still, like, the biggest, ultimate jerk. He will kill indiscriminately. But they make that hilarious. Frieza is so petty that it is just amazing, and they play it for laughs. And it's great. Like, the best Frieza has ever been, let's say. And it's just, like, the whole movie is like that. I like it. It's got funny. Yeah, it's got funny. No, it's got humor. It's got what I would call, I guess you would say that I'm kind of a Dragon Ball Z nerd. And in that sense, there's this thing where Goku's personality between the manga, the anime, and the American English dub changes depending on where you view it. In the original Dragon Ball manga, Goku is kind of an idiot to a fault. Like, he is the ultimate hick country bumpkin, doesn't know anything, kind of doesn't feel anything. Like, he doesn't feel love. He just kind of wants to fight all the time, to the point where it's, that is played up for laughs. Like, everyone's like, oh, Goku, what's the matter with you? All you want to do is fight and eat. And it's not even like this thing where, he has a personality. That's just who Goku is. He's this big dumb moron who just fights and eats. Goku has a purity about him. And in the manga, he's more pure than he is in the anime, and especially in the North American English dub, where they try and make him more into like a cool guy, like a cool, like, superhero man sort of thing, where, he's not a complete moron. He has a brain in his head. He has, he thinks through with some amount of logic, where, that's not the original Goku. And in Dragon Ball Super Broly, the original Goku comes through a lot more. It feels the tone of some of the writing feels a lot more close to that original Dragon Ball manga than it has probably in a really long time. And I love that. That's really good too. The animation is, for the most part, pretty incredible. The whole thing with the way Dragon Ball Super, the TV series, started out so ugly and then ended up being like super beautiful towards the end. There was like a specific animation director they hired midway through the series, as I understand it, and he's the one that is responsible for the Dragon Ball Super anime starting to look so good. So with this Broly movie, they kind of just turned it over to him to direct the whole movie, and the animation quality is pretty much stellar throughout. There are some moments like it gets to be pretty disorienting, I'd say. It really feels kind of like they're showing off a lot of the time. There are so many scenes where, like, the camera will spin around characters like 360 degrees, if only to say, like, hey, look, isn't this so cool? Look at how good we are at animating fight scenes. And they're good at animating fight scenes, but a lot of the time I didn't really understand what was going on. Besides, I guess there was a punch in there somewhere. But it's kind of hard to tell what's going on sometimes because they're constantly doing all these like fun camera tricks. They're spinning the camera around characters constantly. They're rotating. They're doing all like these crazy animation tricks, and it looks cool, but it's just hard to follow. Sometimes anyway. Like, most of the movie is pretty legible, let's say. The other thing that kind of bugs me about this movie is that, okay, so they made 2 Dragon Ball Z movies. They made Battle of Gods and they made Resurrection of Frieza. And those became the basis to start Dragon Ball Super. So they made adaptations of Battle of Gods and Resurrection of Frieza for the Dragon Ball Super anime. And from there, the Dragon Ball Super anime kept going past those movies to do new plot lines about Goo Vegeta and Super Saiyan Blue and Tournament of Power and Evil Goku, future timelines, alternate universes, things like that. And with this Super Broly movie, like currently Dragon Ball Super is on hiatus. The series ended. Goku punched an alien so hard that the alien finally gave up. Or whatever. Again, not seen Dragon Ball Super, but I do know the basic beats of what happens, especially towards the end. So, with this Dragon Ball Super Broly movie, it really starts to feel like they're leaving holes open in this movie specifically because they know they're going to adapt it into a television series later on. The movie doesn't feel incomplete, but it does feel kind of like little things were left unsaid just so that they could adapt it into an episode, let's say. I'm trying to think of like a specific example here. There's some things like how Broly gets to point A to point B sometimes that isn't really explained very well. Certain characters will just appear in certain places without explaining how they got there. There's like this whole montage towards the end of the movie. So like the whole Dragon Ball thing is like, Goku has to train up and get strong to beat the bad guy. And they kind of have this montage moment where, hours and hours and hours are supposed to pass, and it passes in like 2 minutes. And that's one of those things where, like, obviously, if this was a TV series anime, that would be multiple episodes. So it's little things like that definitely feel like there is room for expansion, and they very specifically left room for expansion, especially given the way that the movie ends. And I'm not really going to spoil the ending here, but I'll just say that they leave a lot of doors very, very, very wide open. This movie does not end definitively on anything, basically. They are basically pointing at the horizon and saying there will be a sequel to this movie very soon. So, that's also a thing as well. But, overall, I like the Dragon Ball Super Broly movie. If you are a Dragon Ball fan, hopefully you've seen it already. If you haven't seen it already, Hopefully you didn't hear all the spoilers I just gave. And if you did hear the spoilers I just gave, hopefully you're not mad about them. I think I did warn you that I was going to be spoiling a lot about this movie and Dragon Ball Super in general. But that was also a long discussion. I remember saying I was going to spoil the ending of Dragon Ball Super and to skip ahead a few minutes. But that was like 10 minutes ago. But yes, Dragon Ball Super Broly gets a B+ from me, let's say, or like an A-. That's my grade. There's another thing towards the end of the movie. Again, I say they leave like things wide open. There is a moment that happens, and I don't know if it's a callback to Dragon Ball Super, because Dragon Ball Super gets into like all this alternate dimension stuff and whatever. There is a moment near the end of the movie, big spoilers here, where Broly punches Goku so hard that it's like they go into an alternate dimension for a minute. It's this really weird sequence where, like, Broly lands like this super strong mega punch and the screen shatters and all of a sudden they're in like this fractal universe and Goku kind of goes, "What the?" And they never explain what that is. It's just something that happens and they spend like 60 or 90 seconds, like 30 seconds, I don't know, but they spend a non-trivial amount of time in this weird, like, fractal spirograph universe. And they don't explain what that is. They don't explain how they got there. They don't explain how they get out. It just happens. And it's like, what is this? Are they going to explain this in a future movie? Is this tying into something in the future? It's really weird. And I hope they explain it. And, or at least hint at an explanation. Like, I'm the kind of person, I don't necessarily need everything spelled out for me, but, just some kind of suggestion as to, hey, why did they all of a sudden go to the spirograph dimension for 20 seconds? That's all I need. Just a suggestion of what's going on there. But, again, movie's wide open. There's going to be a sequel. There better be, given how wide open this movie ends. We'll find out. That's Dragon Ball Super Broly. Go see it. What I've been playing this month is, like 3 or 4 different things. Up top, at the top of the list, is getting around to trying an emulator called Cemu. C-E-M-U. It is a Wii U emulator. And it's one of these weird things where, like, you think about how emulation works, right? And usually it's the kind of thing where the more advanced a console is, the crazier the system you need to emulate it. So, for example, the Super Nintendo is a console that runs at like 7 megahertz max. And to emulate, like the bare minimum to emulate a Super Nintendo, way back in like 2001 or whatever, you'd need like a 266 megahertz processor. And even then, like a computer processor, I mean. And then even then, you'd run into games that wouldn't run super well on your 266 megahertz processor. And nowadays, for, nearly perfect Super Nintendo emulation, you need like a dual core, supercomputer. Well, not supercomputer, but you know what I mean, right? You need like a modern CPU to emulate the Super Nintendo accurately. You need a pretty modern PC to emulate the GameCube and the Wii and the PlayStation 2 accurately. So when you think about emulating a Wii U, which is, I'll say, maybe like a little bit more powerful than sorry, I've still got kind of a stuffy nose sometimes. I don't know how much of this I'm going to be leaving in, but I keep getting like this tickle in my nostrils when I talk. And as I talk, my nose starts stuffing up. But you have a Wii U, which is, I would say, a little more powerful than an Xbox 360. So, we'll say around that level of technology. And you'd think, at least I would think, that in order to emulate a Wii U, you would need like a Core i9, super powerful processor or whatever else. And as it turns out, I think Cemu, the Wii U emulator, runs better on my system than Dolphin does, which is a Wii and GameCube emulator. It is absolutely black magic voodoo how well Cemu runs on my system. I get a full, almost locked 60 frames per second in Mario Kart 8, which I have been playing quite a bit of. It's actually pretty comfortable playing Mario Kart 8 on my computer. I almost don't need to hook up my Wii U anymore because of how well things run on CMU. It's not quite one-to-one perfect just yet, but it is pretty close. And obviously what really interested me in this, there's been videos floating around of The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild running in 4K at 60 frames per second. And that is a beautiful thing that I have not yet tried, because it's kind of challenging to find all the files for this stuff. The easiest way, obviously, would be if you have the homebrew stuff installed on your Wii U, which I do not. So tracking down the files for the games that I do own is a challenge sometimes. There's this whole like complicated setup process with needing decryption keys, and installing DLC is really difficult. Things like that. It's very complicated, but once you get it all set up, there is very little to set up, as it turns out. And once you figure all that out, it is very glorious to see, Mario Kart 8 running at my monitor's native resolution at a locked 60 frames per second with like higher resolution shadows than the Wii U can do. There's like tweaks you can do, like you can turn down the light bloom strength if you don't like how strong the light bloom is in Mario Kart 8. You can actually go into the settings and tweak them sort of like a PC game, where you can turn down the strength of the light bloom, you can turn up the resolution of shadows. It is very, very, very good. And it just, every time I play a game in CMU, it feels like magic. Because I don't understand how games run that well. Obviously, like, some of that is, if you don't know, like, how all this stuff works. So you have the GameCube, right? And then you have the Wii, and then you have the Wii U. As far as I've ever heard, all three of those consoles, the GameCube, Wii, and the Wii U, are essentially the same thing. Obviously, the Wii U has things that the Wii couldn't do. The Wii has things that the GameCube couldn't do. But at like their very core heart of those systems or whatever, the architecture on the chips is very similar. It's just the Wii is faster than the GameCube, and the Wii U is faster than the Wii. And that's part of the reason why I think the Wii U, some people say the Wii U failed, is because it is essentially a very, very, very overclocked GameCube. And in terms of like the Xbox 360, the Xbox One, the PlayStation 4, they are not very compatible with that kind of microchip architecture or whatever. That's what I've heard anyway. So by that, I mean, as far as emulating a Wii U goes, I think the developers of CMU could probably like take the source code of Dolphin, the Wii and GameCube emulator, and sort of build on that to build CMU. I would expect anyway. Or at least be able to like look at their documentation and better understand, how those chips work and things like that. Anyway, what this also means is that, I've finally gotten around to trying New Super Mario Bros. U. I almost said New Super Mario Bros. DS, that's not true. The Wii U version of New Super Mario Bros. And if you've been following me for a while, you'll know that I kind of have a vendetta against the New Super Mario Bros. Franchise. That first DS game was alright, it was a little bland, but it was fine, I think I ended up doing like a full clear of that, back when it was like one of the only DS games I had. I didn't love it, but I didn't hate it, it was fine. But when it came to New Super Mario Bros. For the Wii, that is when I really started to hate this franchise. Not only because New Super Mario Bros. Wii is just, even more bland and generic than the DS version, but there was like this weird problem with the controls in New Super Mario Bros. Wii that I just could not get over. It felt like there was controller latency or something. Like, I never felt fully in control of Mario. I've talked about this before, like in regards to Donkey Kong Country Returns, maybe a little bit of Rayman Origins, where these characters feel like weirdly heavy and sluggish, and kind of like the controls don't really respond the way I'd like them to. And that kind of all started with New Super Mario Bros. Wii. And I remember going round and round in circles with a friend of mine who swore up and down, left and right, inside and out, that the game controlled just fine, that he had none of the problems I was describing, that everything was fine, that the game was great, that it was his favorite 2D Mario game ever made. And that argument, that ongoing argument that lasted, years and years and years, like seriously years and years and years, that we would, every now and then we just bring it up again because, I'd try and play the game or he'd brag about something he did in the game like he was, I don't know, it was just... Point is, I did not like New Super Mario Bros. Wii. I gave that game so many different second chances, too. Obviously, I owned it on the original Wii. I've played it on Dolphin multiple times. I've started multiple new files. I've tweaked settings. I've tried to figure out the source of this weird controller lag in this game, and I was never able to track it down or fix it or anything like that. And... like I said, that's something I felt in Donkey Kong Country Returns. Again, I tried emulating that game. I bought it on the 3DS. I could never figure out the source of that lag either. I felt it a little bit in Rayman Origins, even though Rayman Origins was on, PlayStation 4, PlayStation 3, Xbox 360, PC, etc., etc., etc. But it was just this problem with some of these platformers where they didn't control the way I felt like they should control. And because of this, because I developed this really intense hatred for how bland and generic and sluggish and weird New Super Mario Bros. Wii was, I was frankly sort of afraid of New Super Mario Bros. U. I figured it would just be another bad New Super Mario Bros. Game. Because, people weren't super lukewarm about New Super Mario Bros. 2 for the 3DS, right? And from my perspective, I took that as, finally there are cracks starting to show in the armor of this franchise. When people would tell me, New Super Mario Bros. U is so much better, people would tell me that a lot because they knew how much I hated the Wii game. And it made me curious because, obviously I want to like New Super Mario Brothers. Again, I like that original DS game. I am open to the idea of playing a new 2D Mario game, as long as it's good. So people tell me New Super Mario Bros. U is good, and it makes me curious. And it's this case where Nintendo games never come down in price. I think even now, in 2019, a Wii U disc of New Super Mario Bros. U is probably like $30 or $40, maybe even $50 or $60. And that's not a price I was willing to pay for a game that I might hate. I would pay $15 max for that game, preferably under $15. And I would never find a copy of that game for under $15. I can tell you that right now. So, Cemu comes around, this Wii U emulator, and it is remarkably easy to, let's say, once you know the trick, to acquire games that you maybe don't entirely own for the purposes of sampling them. The old delete after 24 hours thing, right? Right, that's the baseline. Obviously, and this is like the honest truth, I'm not being smarmy about this, all the other games in Cemu I've played, that I'm interested in having to emulate on my PC are Wii U games that I actually physically own. The only one I've downloaded that I do not own is New Super Mario Bros. U, so that I could finally satiate this curiosity without having to break the bank. Okay, now that is established, no script, folks. Now that is established, I can safely say I've played probably the first two worlds of New Super Mario Bros. U by now, and I think everyone was right. I think that's a good game. I want to keep playing it, but I keep telling myself I should do the deed, do the good thing, and actually just buy a Wii U disc one day. Now that I know that I like the game, I should actually, not pirate it. I should spend the money and give Nintendo the money to say, hey, you made a New Super Mario Bros. Game that I like. And the reason why that I think I like New Super Mario Bros. U, part of the reason that really bummed me out about the DS and Wii game, was how bland they were. They not even necessarily bland, but I think the word is safe. They are very safe games. They don't really do tons that is like unique, right? And every now and then you get something unique. Like I think there's like a sandstorm level in the Wii version. The DS version has a level where you're running across giant wigglers. They did have creative ideas every now and then, but they always felt kind of like they were in the shadow of the old Mario games, of like Super Mario Bros. 3, Super Mario World, things like that, that felt like they were trying not to break the rules. And what differs with New Super Mario Bros. U is that it's a little more willing to break the rules, and maybe not even break the rules, but kind of bend the rules. It's not afraid to be a little bit messy. And I think that's what really makes it stand out for me. It's not really concerned with maintaining the legacy of retro Mario, I guess. It is finally feeling like it's a little more comfortable in being itself. And by that I just mean there are like things in levels you'll run across would be like, this would never be in a classic Mario game. Like, this feels, the way this level is set up is kind of messy, but also kind of playfully messy. I don't know if like anything that I'm saying is actually coming through without giving specific examples. And unfortunately, like, it's been a week since the last time I touched this game, so I don't really have any specific examples in mind. I just know that there are moments that feel almost like a Mario Maker level in a way. But like in a good way. In a way that feels like it wasn't this immaculate, over-polished, bland, boring thing. It's something somebody sort of threw together, and you get a sense of personality through that, where, normally you wouldn't. I don't know, I feel like I'm saying nothing right now, but rest assured, I like New Super Mario Bros. U. I should probably end up buying that game at some point, just so that I can absolve myself of the guilt. I don't really pirate games very much anymore, because, I don't know, like, I have money now. Piracy is something I did when I was in high school, and when I was, newly out of high school, when I had $0 to my name constantly, always. And now, I'm getting a little bit of money through YouTube and Patreon and whatever else every now and then. So I have, money to buy games now, so I buy games. So I should buy New Super Mario Bros. U before I play any more. I don't know. There is like a bummer about New Super Mario Bros. U though. It's kind of like the one bummer right now. Well, I guess there's two bummers. First bummer would be that it keeps the save system from New Super Mario Bros. Wii for whatever reason, where, which I guess is like the save system from New Super Mario Bros. DS, where they only let you save after you complete like a fortress level, which is kind of weird. But they do have like this quick save system for some reason. I don't really know why they make the distinction between a quick save and a hard fortress save, because I don't know, that doesn't really make sense to give two versions of a save system like that. Anyway, that's bummer number one, is like the weird way it handles its save system. Bummer number two is the music. For whatever reason, this reuses all of the music from like both of the old New Super Mario Bros. Games. So it's all the same songs from the DS game, from the Wii game, just recycled almost verbatim in a lot of cases. And that music isn't great. It's not terrible. I'm not one of those people that hates like the ba-ba or whatever in the music. I do kind of like how it syncs up, like the enemies will sync up like dance moves with the music and whatever. But I just don't like those songs very much. It's almost like mall music in a way, They're not masterpiece songs, and for whatever reason, they're treating them like they are, because they keep turning up. They turn up, they debuted in that DS game, they turn up in the Wii game, I think they turn up in the 3DS game, now they're here on the Wii U game, they're in Super Mario Maker, and it's just like, guys, like, between Mario 1, Mario 3, and Mario World, they didn't really use very many, like, musical themes between those games. So I don't necessarily know why they feel the need to reuse the music across this new Super Mario Brothers franchise. It's really weird, and the music's really bad. Or not bad, just bland and boring, and ugh. But besides the music, besides the save system, A+ recommended. If you like fell off the new Super Mario Brothers wagon for whatever reason, like I did, maybe give the U version a try. It just came out on the Switch too, is New Super Mario Brothers U Deluxe. So give that a look. Give the Wii U version a look if you have that, and just see what's up. You might be surprised how much you like this game. I certainly was. Last month I mentioned I was waiting on a copy of Dragon Quest Builders. That finally arrived, and to be honest, that's been probably the most of what I played this month. I've probably put like 20 or 30 hours into Dragon Quest Builders in the last 3 weeks. I have played that game a lot, and the extremely dangerous thing about that game, after putting like 30 hours into it, I have just barely scratched the surface. It seems like that game is divided up into chapters. I don't know how many chapters there are. There's room on the menu for like 8 chapters, and I'm still on chapter 1. If you don't know what Dragon Quest Builders is, it's essentially Minecraft with a quest system. And a structure, let's say. So the whole story of the game is that everyone else in the world has forgotten how to build things. It's almost a post-apocalypse in a way. You wake up in this dungeon with the voice of this goddess speaking to you, telling you that you are the legendary builder, that you are the only person left on the planet that remembers how to build things. And that's kind of like a contrivance, but it's a contrivance that works, because now all of a sudden you have people coming to you asking you to build things. And you end up building a little bit of a town, and you recruit new town members, sort of like in Terraria, where you build specific building types, and then you go out and you find someone, and then they inhabit that building type. You build workshops, and inns, and teleporters to other places, dressing rooms, armories, things like that. And it's pretty fun. It is a little bit too structured for my tastes, though. Like, I like having more structure like that, but there are certain ways in which it is a little too structured. So the whole game, you're on this series of islands, right? And it's the kind of thing where you can actually see the other islands on the horizon, to the point where you reach like this point where there's this sign posted on this cliff, and it says, there used to be a bridge here, but the evil dragon lord or whatever destroyed the bridge in the war that claimed everyone's lives 100 years ago. And there is maybe 10 blocks between your side of the bridge and the other side of the bridge to the island to like the east or whatever. And you think, okay, well, it's not very far, I can just rebuild the bridge. And very quickly you discover that they put invisible walls up to create places where you can't build. And it seems like all the islands in the game are all surrounded by these invisible walls, so you can't just build everywhere and go anywhere. You do really have to follow the storyline. You have to progress only where they want you to progress. Things like that. But even in that context, it's pretty fun, because you always have things to do. There's people to talk to. There's quests to get. There's many, many different types of monsters. Kind of like one of the whole early points, like you build up to, is that raids attack your town. So very quickly you have to learn to build defenses. Again, like building things like armories and workshops, and changing rooms, and kitchens, and things like that. Apparently those upgrade your townspeople so that they're stronger, and they're better at fighting monsters. It's a really cool take on the builder genre, if you want to call it that. It's a little weird with the way it's structured. It sounds like once I clear this chapter, because, I've put 30 hours in it, feels like it's building up to a climax, I'm getting close to what would be considered the end of the game, and but I'm only on chapter 1 of like 5 or 6 or whatever. I don't know. And from my understanding, as a friend of mine who has played more of this game than me, once you clear a chapter, it sounds like you start all over from scratch in the next chapter. So it's almost like restarting the whole game over again. You forget all your crafting recipes, you lose your town. It sounds like you might even go somewhere completely different. There was a point where I found like a world map, and I see that there's like ice areas, and there's a desert, and there's all these other like forested areas and things like that. Places I've never been to before. Swamps and whatever else. So, assumedly, you stay, I guess, probably in the same map for the next chapter, but you go to like different areas and things like that. But it sounds like once you clear a chapter, you start all over from scratch. And that sounds kind of weird in itself. Again, like I said, you can't just build everywhere. You get like free reign to build quite, freely if you want. You just can't go to places you're not supposed to be, essentially. Which, again, understandable, but kind of annoying. I'm used to, kind of in Minecraft, just being able to generate a world and walk forever, I kind of have video game wanderlust. That should be obvious by now. So it is a little bit annoying that it doesn't let me do that I am provided, like, a finite building space. And, like, that's the other thing that's kind of annoying, actually. So you have this town area, and... Oh, sorry, bumped everything. That probably came through loud and clear. You have this very specific building zone that contains your town. It is like a square block that is like 50 blocks by 50 blocks squared, right? And in these 50 blocks by 50 blocks is where you have to build everything for your town. You have to, every building must be contained in this 50 block by 50 block square, otherwise your NPCs won't recognize it as a structure to inhabit. And very quickly, that space starts to feel pretty cramped. One of the most recent things I've done in my game of Dragon Quest Builders is building an inn, and, you think of an inn is like, all these little rooms that are like, the size of actual buildings. And because I'm so strapped for space, a room in my inn is basically 4 blocks. It's room enough to put a bed and a vase and a door, and there's not any room for anything else. So you end up being pretty strapped for space, and no matter how much you level up, because your town does have like levels attached to it as you build more structures and place more stuff in those structures, you gain experience points that levels up your home. That space never grows. You only ever have 50 by 50 blocks to build in. It never expands to 60 or anything like that, and it really should. Because you end up with like 6 or 7 people running around that little space, and they're all asking you to build specific room types, and there just isn't enough room for everything. And that's kind of annoying. But, I love the game. I actually need to get back to it. These last few days have been taken up by another game that I'll get to here in a moment. But, I would recommend Dragon Quest Builders, but also at the same time, Dragon Quest Builders 2 is about to come out. It's been out in Japan, I think, since December, and it sounds like it's a pretty big upgrade over the first game. Specifically like in the camera department. Dragon Quest Builders 2 will have like a first-person mode, like Minecraft. That's something that the first game doesn't have. There's no first-person mode, which is actually, like, that's another thing that's annoying about Dragon Quest Builders, is the camera. You only get one camera angle. It's this super pulled-out third-person view that's almost like an RTS view. Like, if you think about, like, Pikmin, let's say, on the GameCube and the Wii and whatever else, the way Olimar is like this almost tiny little dot because the camera's pulled so far back, that's kind of what Dragon Quest Builders is like. And as far as like entering interior buildings and things like that, places with rooftops, it turns into kind of a mess. So, like, the whole point of the game is that you're never supposed to build rooftops on anything so that you can, like, the camera is positioned in such a way that you can see inside. The whole game is sort of based around that concept. Like, nothing will ever come in through the roof as long as you're smart about the way you build it. And it looks like Dragon Quest Builders 2 solves that problem. In the screenshots and the videos they've shown buildings with rooftops. They've shown this first-person mode. So, if anything I've said recently about this game sounds interesting to you, if the idea of Minecraft with a quest system and structure and a better combat system that's, kind of like A Link to the Past, Legend of Zelda-ish, maybe it would be worth waiting for Dragon Quest Builders 2. I think the release date is in, like, the North American release date was like June or July, so that's not actually that far away. That's like 5 months from now, maybe 4. So there was that. I've put like 30 hours into that, and I'm not even a fourth of the way through that game. The other thing I've put so much time into this month is... So Microsoft was having a deal for Xbox Game Pass. And if you don't know what Xbox Game Pass is, they bill it as kind of like the Netflix for video games. You pay a flat monthly fee, and essentially you subscribe to a service that has just this giant library of games for you to choose from. So on the Xbox, they advertise as having over 100 Xbox One games with Xbox Games Pass. But Game Pass also applies to the PC. So all the games that Microsoft is putting out on the PC are also part... Oh, excuse me. Here, hold that thought. I need to take a drink. Anyway, like I was saying, so everything Microsoft is putting out on the PC usually gets added to this Xbox Game Pass thing, even though it is on the PC. But, that's kind of the first big problem, is that so they advertise more than 100 games if you play it on the Xbox One. If you have if you log in through Xbox Game Pass on your Xbox One, you get this library of 100 games, and that's $9.99 a month. Through the PC, you get a library of, what did I write? Oh, I thought I wrote it down. It's like 15 games. It's not very much at all. So, Xbox One users get games like Killer Instinct, Sunset Overdrive, Gears of War Ultimate Edition, things like that. Those are games that have PC ports, but for whatever reason are not part of Xbox Game Pass on the PC. It is pretty weird that it works on the PC, but is so limited. But like I said earlier, Microsoft was having a deal for Game Pass. Obviously, I do not own an Xbox One, but I do own a PC. So, that list of 15 games or whatever seemed interesting. And the special deal was that if you were not an Xbox Game Pass subscriber, you would get 1 month plus 1 month for $2. So it was supposed to be $2 for 1 month, but then they had a buy one, get one, so it ended up being $2 for 2 months. And as it turned out, I had $1.90 in my Microsoft account. So literally, I was paying 10 cents for 2 months of Game Pass. So I figured, what the heck, I'll sign up for it. Even though there's only 15 games on the PC, that would be my library to choose from. For 10 cents, you kind of can't pass things up. So what I was hoping to play was Forza Horizon 3, but Horizon 3 isn't part of Game Pass. Forza Horizon 4 is, so that's the one I've been playing so much of these last few days. And what can I say? It's a Forza game. Like, that's the long and short of it. I like racing games. That is a very good racing game. End of discussion. Horizon 4 is actually pretty cool in a lot of respects. It finally feels like they're sort of evolving that formula a little bit. I've been kind of hot and cold on the Horizon series. I really loved that first game. Forza Horizon 1 took place in Colorado, in the mountains, in autumn. It was beautiful. Forza Horizon 2 takes place, I think, in France, and just felt like more of the same from the little bit I tried of it. I played a demo of it, and they put out like this weird free mini game that was like, drive around the Forza Horizon 2 world as Fast and the Furious characters. I played that, didn't really like it either. Forza Horizon 3 was in Australia, and was a little more playful, a little more fun. I ended up playing like a couple hours of that on my cousin's Xbox one night while house sitting for him. But like those first three games are all kind of identical in a lot of ways. They have a lot of the same race events. The only thing that really changes is kind of the scenery, right? They're very, very similar games. Forza Horizon 4 is where they finally start to change things up a little bit, and they have like the big thing with Forza Horizon 4 is seasons, right? So as you play, you connect to the internet, and I think every week the season changes. So like it'll be summer, and then it will turn to fall, and then it will turn to winter, and then it will turn to spring. With the way seasons change, it also changes driving conditions. So obviously snowy roads are very slippery. Fall and spring are marked by like very rainy weather, which, has visibility issues. Summer is just, beautiful and green and whatever else. And that's kind of their big hook. In addition to like kind of changing up the mission objectives a little bit. Not like super, super big, you're still finding old classic cars in barns. You're still crashing into billboards. You're still doing showcase events where you like race a train. But it feels just different enough from Forza Horizon 3 and Forza Horizon 1 that, I'm really starting to dig it. But it is revealing sort of a new problem with my system, and that's that hard drive that it's installed to is getting kind of old. It's a 2 terabyte Western Digital Black, and I bought it in 2015, and it is obviously 2019, and hot tip for everyone out there listening to this right now, but if you have a computer and the hard drive in that computer is 4 years old or more, that usually seems to be around the shelf life of a hard drive. And, that hard drive is starting to feel really, really slow. So before I lose all the data on that drive, I should probably buy a new hard drive and replace it. And I don't know if you guys have like tried to buy a hard drive recently, but it's not a fun experience. So way back in 2015, when I bought that 2 terabyte hard drive, it was right after a Taiwanese tsunami disaster that kind of ruined a lot of hard drive manufacturing plants. And what this meant is that like prices for hard drives skyrocketed, right? It used to be that like 2 terabyte hard drives were getting down to around like $70, $80, $90 at that point. And the disaster hit, and suddenly these drives are like $125, $130. And, at the time, you had to suck it up. It was a disaster. These manufacturing plants were destroyed. Nothing could really be done about it. If you needed a hard drive, that's just what you paid. And it's been 4 years since then. You'd think that, hard drive prices would come down. Obviously, as these companies recover their hard drive manufacturing operations, prices will come down again. And they haven't. This is something I've been doing research into just these last couple days, but that drive I bought, that 2 terabyte Western Digital Black hard drive that I bought in 2015, it cost me $124 from Newegg, right? In today's money, that exact same hard drive from Newegg costs $119, which I think is a difference of around $6. That's how far prices have dropped in 4 years. $6 whole. And in the process of this, I've actually learned of kind of a racket that Western Digital is running, and that is the external hard drive racket. So if you didn't know, external hard drives are actually cheaper to buy right now than internal hard drives. And there's a very clear reason for that. We'll get there. Essentially, if you don't know what an external hard drive is, it is an internal hard drive put into a special case in order to be used over USB. And let's say for a 4 terabyte hard drive, a 4 terabyte external drive is $119. A 4 terabyte internal drive is $175. The difference between the external drive and the internal drive is the external drive has a special case on it that allows the hard drive to be accessed over USB. That's literally all it is. If you buy that external hard drive, you can actually do something called shucking, which is to remove this external layer and turn it back into an internal hard drive. And people got wise to this and would actually start buying external drives, shucking them, and then selling them at internal drive prices. So essentially, you'd buy that 4 terabyte hard drive for $119, peel the case off, and then sell it on eBay for $175. Western Digital got smart to this, and they actually started putting special external hard drives into these external hard drive cases. And what this means is that when you take that hard drive out of its casing, you can't use it as an internal hard drive anymore. Not without buying like a special adapter or actually doing like some hardware surgery to disable a specific pin that tells it to disable the drive when you try and like plug it into your power supply. And what this says to me is that Western Digital could be charging lower prices for their hard drives, but they aren't, because they know that they can charge $175 for an internal 4 terabyte hard drive and charge $119 for an external 4 terabyte hard drive. So they've, instead of just bringing the prices of internal hard drives down, they're making it so that you can't turn the cheaper external hard drive into an internal hard drive, just so that they can keep charging $175 for an internal hard drive. And that's the racket, basically. And it is leaving me sick, because I need a new hard drive. I was hoping I could upgrade to a bigger drive because I do video capture and I need more storage space, but it's looking like I'll only be able to replace the drive straight across, basically. And that sucks, because, I'm running out of space on this 2 terabyte hard drive. With all my Steam games, with all my video capture and everything else, I think I'm down to about 70 gigs free out of 2 terabytes. So, having like a 3 or a 4 terabyte hard drive to replace this 2 terabyte would be pretty good, but it just doesn't look like it's possible. I don't have that much money in savings. I was trying to save up for a Switch, and it just, this is the way the chips fall. And my main C drive where Windows is installed, I should probably be thinking about replacing that soon too. And it was all hinging on the idea that, hard drive prices would eventually come down, and they just aren't. And the extra dumb thing is that solid state drives, the prices on those are plummeting. A solid state drive almost costs as much as a platter hard drive. Platter hard drives is what I'm storing all my data on right now. 4 years ago, in 2014, when I bought this 2 terabyte hard drive, a solid state drive, like a 256 gigabyte solid state drive, was probably $400 or $500 or $600. And these days you can get a 500 gigabyte solid state drive for probably $100. Prices are coming down fast on solid state drives, to the point where if I could just wait out another couple years, I could probably get a 2 terabyte solid state drive and just use that for my main storage. It'd probably be, the same price I'd be paying for an actual 2 terabyte platter drive. But again, I want more space. That's kind of the whole point. So, I don't know, hard drives, man, it's a racket, and I don't like it. Ideally, with this podcast, I would have also been able to talk about Crackdown 3, because that was one of the other reasons I spent the 10 cents on a Game Pass subscription for 2 months, was that it was a couple days before Crackdown 3 came out. That's out now. I could have downloaded it and installed it by now, but I just haven't gotten around to it just yet. Reviews are kind of all over the place for that game. It sounds like, for a game that was in development for 6 or 7 years, it doesn't sound like it came out the other end very well. So I don't know. I'll have to see that for myself eventually when I get around to that. Other Game Pass games I could have tried was Sea of Thieves. That's a Game Pass game. Haven't really tried that yet either. Actually, I think that's probably about it for the video games I've been playing this month. There is, I mentioned last month, Pokemon, what was it, Ultraviolet, which is a ROM hack that takes Pokemon Fire Red and makes it so you don't have to trade to get Pokemon anymore. It basically lets you catch all 151 on the same cartridge without needing to, trade or do any other weird shenanigans like that to get, like, special event Pokemon or whatever. I'm almost done with that game. I'm not like the biggest Pokemon fan in the world or anything like that. I think I mentioned last month that I'm kind of like an old stickler about it. I'm one of those people that's like, I think the first 151 is the best. And, I don't really like future Pokemon games because they're kind of slow and they kind of went in a direction that I didn't really agree with. They just kind of recycle the same structure from that very first Pokemon game without really doing anything super new. They just kind of pile more systems onto the stack without really addressing the problems that have been there since like 1997. I know Pokemon Sun and Moon kind of fixed that. I've yet to play either of those games, so, But with this Ultraviolet hack, I guess I've been kind of enjoying myself. It's kind of interesting to me to contrast this with Final Fantasy VI. It took me the better part of an entire year to play up to the final boss of Final Fantasy VI. And with Pokemon, I have 6 of 8 badges, so, I'm rounding the corner here almost to the end of the game. During the break earlier, I was actually playing through the power plant section, trying to catch Zapdos. So, I am rounding the corner to the final few gyms of that game. I think all that's left is Cinnabar Island, and then fighting Giovanni, and then going to the Elite Four. So, and like I did all of that in around, we'll say, a month and a half, versus, again, the almost full year it took me to get to the final boss of Final Fantasy VI. And, I'm not necessarily like super enjoying myself with Pokemon. I'm not like playing the game more than usual, or at least it doesn't feel like I'm playing it more than usual, but I am seemingly making a lot more progress, a lot more quickly, and that's really all I have to say about that, outside of just having more old man opinions about future Pokemon games. But I don't really want to get into that. So anyway, I guess that's the end of the podcast. I'm out of topics to ramble about. Hopefully I'll get in gear here and actually put some things out for all you to ingest. Articles and videos. And now, like with my SoundCloud, that's something else I should have mentioned earlier. I finally ran out of space on my SoundCloud, so I should probably start posting like music collections here on Patreon a lot more frequently. But the problem there is that Patreon doesn't really give you a lot of storage space. A single post on Patreon, I think, tops out at 100 or 200 megabytes, which, obviously a single year's collection of my music is well over 100 megabytes, which means splitting everything up, and that's a hassle in itself. So I don't know. I think I've mentioned it before, but I've also been wrestling with the possibility of just throwing it all up on Bandcamp, or at least doing like best of collections on Bandcamp. So I don't know. Weird podcast. Anyway, I'll see you guys next month, hopefully earlier, hopefully in a better mood, hopefully this podcast turned out okay with my very light scripting. I don't know. It still felt kind of like I was going off on weird tangents all the time, and like I didn't really understand what I was actually saying. Words were falling out of my mouth. But if you like words falling out of my mouth, let me know. Let me know if this was okay or not. Anyway, I don't know how to say goodbye, so this is me saying goodbye. See you next month.